All right. So we're going to use two blankets or two towels as our props. And we'll just find a nice comfy seat, something that allows your spine to be at ease. Ah, settling in a way where your whew, breath is as simple, as easy, as delicate as can be. Really finding your version of center. I really like these longer opportunities to center that we take. We'll give ourselves about 45 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, let's use an exhale to tuck our chin down to our sternum. And just let your chin settle and nestle here. At the same time, don't allow that anterior collapse of the shoulders. So stay broad across the shoulder girdle and just start to move your head laterally. Just an exploration of that posterior neck musculature. One of the things that's really challenging, I think, for online practice is finding the ability to ground and center and treat the practice as if it was a in-person practice. That's why I really love having that extended version of centering at the front end. Most online practices kind of just jump right into things because the attention span isn't long enough. So I appreciate the heck out of you guys for working to center in. Maybe one more time of movement in either direction. And we'll come back to neutral. Think about the skull resting on that cervical spine, and then let's do some nice full rotations at neutral. Moving through, and maybe even playing with how the shoulder girdle is interconnected with cervical spine musculature. Right, kind of obvious there's muscle that transverses both sections. But if you work on scapular retraction, particularly on the opposite side of your rotation, you can really feel that chain of musculature and how everything is interlinked. Maybe one more time in each direction. And eventually we'll find our way back to a centered neutral. And then let's take this last piece. We'll lift the chin, go into extension for the cervical spine. And we're going to do some big arches of range of motion here. the musculature really shifts from being almost exclusively lateral edge of the cervical spine into kind of this medial bunching at the base of the skull. And all of that musculature that kind of ties in and holds the torso and the head together starts to get involved here. Note how you can play again with the shoulder girdle to help change the way that musculature is receiving the movement. You can also play with the bottom jaw jutting to give that musculature more pull into that posterior chain. Eventually, when it feels appropriate for you, we'll come back to neutral. Settle our head here. Just breathe. When you feel kind of realigned, reintegrated, let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. Tabletop, as I think about, as active as we're going to get today. So think about crafting the width of the hands and really allowing for the weight dispersal across the hands so that no one section, particularly the heels, are holding extra amounts of weight. And then keep that hand engagement as you sink back into child's pose. When the hands stay engaged, when the musculature of the hand stays active, it really pulls out the slack in the arm system. We can feel that tightness around the shoulder capsule. When you get back and when you're settled and when the shoulder capsules are more or less loaded without being weight bearing, we can play with them. So press into individual fingers, right? Like index fingers press down, middle fingers press down, ring fingers, pinkies, thumbs. And as you're moving through that finger pressure, note how it changes the response in the shoulder capsule. How when we press our pinkies, it's a completely different piece of stabilizing musculature as when we press the index fingers. And you can think about those long chains of musculature and how fine they are as they get out to those extended digits. And then re-engage all the fingers at once and pull the scapula down towards the tailbone, like you're trying to retract and touch the hips and the scapula together. And then we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Exhale out, tuck the chin, tuck the tailbone, round the back. Get into this articulated arch. Think about the flexion of the spine, and then keep pressing down across the fingers. Really feeling how now we can play with subscapular musculature, right? Now our fingers are working different stabilization pulls down that posterior chain. And then we'll relax. Settle back into tabletop. Note how the belly likely wants to drop and think about finding neutral. And then let's just extend our legs straight out in front of us. Legs extend. Toes splay out wide. Create this staff articulation. Sweep the arms straight up and overhead. Try to extend straight up. See if you can feel that posterior chain. And then let's take that out into a forward fold. This will be a relatively brief forward fold. Just kind of checking in with the posterior chain, checking in with how the upper half, the torso side of the posterior chain, is interacting with the lower half, that hamstring calf space. Last 15 seconds here. And when it feels appropriate for you, let's bring ourselves back into staff. We'll bring the bottoms of the feet together, craft a little butterfly position for the hips, a little external rotation for the hips. Let's clasp the hands either on the toe mounds, the ankles, the shins, or you can even go underneath. It could be on the hamstrings as well, but somewhere where you can have a little bit of hand engagement. And then let's just start to rock our way into another seated forward fold. Settling in, the lateral movement doesn't need to stop. So don't feel like you need to stop the lateral movement as you go forward. Just think about how you can find more space. There are really 3 ways, probably. You may have found more. I think I've found 3. Right? You can create space with your breath. You can create space through the nervous system by just getting more and more relaxed, or you can create space through movement. And so the breath and the nervous system are more or less interrelated. Movement and the nervous system are more or less interrelated. Trying to find more space needs to be, desires to be, through the down regulation of the nervous system response. We'll give ourselves about 20 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, we're going to bring that spine back to vertical. Here's where our hand placement may be extra important. Really thinking about getting to a vertical spine, right? So if we don't have the hip space, we can create more hip space by using pressure of the hands. Now we're going to keep our left hand wherever we're creating that pressure. If we are creating pressure, we're going to take the right hand straight up and overhead, extending towards the sky or ceiling. And then trying to use the hips as your guide. So we want the right hip to be as equally grounded as our left hip as we lean over to the left. The moment the right hip starts to peel up or you start to feel lightness, re-anchor, and then think about finding more space. This forced balance kind of moves the burden of space from the lateral chain to the posterior chain. And so we're likely feeling this if we have an anchored hip weight dispersal. We're likely feeling this on the posterior side of the body. And then we'll come back to neutral. As you come back to neutral, note how that right side posterior musculature is like coming back and it wants to just grind down, cramp down to match the left. Try to free up into that right side, and then let's do the same thing. So we'll settle, create our hips, create our balance. Left arm reaches up. And we're gonna go over towards that right side. Again, once you get any lightness in that left glute, we resettle and then find our way into space. We can relax, we can breathe, or we can move to create space. When you feel balanced, we'll come back to neutral. Once again, elevate, lengthen into the spine. And let's take our props and we're gonna go hot dog fold with both of them. So we end up like this. and like this. And we'll take our first hot dog, just place that kind of the length of the spine. And our second making a T. Essentially here, we're looking for a little head support and a little spine support. And then we are going to lower ourselves down onto that support. The hips are staying anchored. If your head doesn't feel supported, you have lots of options, right? You can bring, depending on your torso geometry, you can bring that higher blanket, head side blanket, on top of the spine blanket. You could also fold that, or you can roll that if you wanted to be more supportive of the cervical spine. Use the props in the way that most benefit you, and then think about where the legs would most benefit as well. So they can be extended, they can be bent, the bottoms of the feet can go back together. All of those are very viable options. There's this young woman who's had her eyes set on a mountain summit. She's had her eyes set on this mountain summit for as long as she can remember. And it's not just that the mountain summit is beckoning, calling physically with its beauty in the distance. It's that there is legend or legends around this particular mountain summit that claim if you get there, you'll have found everything you need. And that idea is pretty enticing. And so for the last few years, this young woman has been preparing for a journey away from her village, across mountain ranges, to the summit of this distant peak. Completely letting go into this space. Really thinking about how your body is softening is melting over the props, how the props are supporting allowing your spine to be an anchor to expand away from. And we'll give ourselves just about 50 more seconds here. when it feels appropriate. Let's bring our knees into a bed position, and then we'll let the knees fall to one side or the other, whatever side feels best for you. And then inhale the knees back to neutral. Exhale the knees over to the second side. Inhale your knees to neutral. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. Reset, resettle. Think about the spine anchoring you. And then inhale your knees together. Both knees will fall over to the left and we'll roll onto the left side. We're going to let the right hand come down, press ourselves up so that we can adjust our props. So we're going to take both blankets, folded hot dog style, and stack them, and then just roll that stack across the mat so that we can lay down over the middle of our prop space. And to do that, just going to lay that left side on our props. We want rough, kind of middle of the weight pressure to be, right at the stable midpoint of the rib cage. If we're too low, if we're just catching that bottom edge of the ribs, we can really put too much pressure there, especially with this nice density of our blanket or towels. So think about being a little higher in the rib cage so there's more stability. Let that left arm extend out. You can determine which hand direction is most ideal for your shoulder. And then the right hand can either take pressure off by pressing down, can also extend up and even reach behind you if that's feeling accessible for your shoulder. Draw your breath into the rib space parallel with the middle of your prop so that we're really feeling that expansiveness, taking that expansiveness in and opening that intercostal musculature with each inhale. A couple days into this journey, this young woman comes across a log bridge across a river. Right, not an uncommon thing to find in a forest. And she sits down, she looks around, there's this beautiful forest floor, and she's surrounded by trees, and she has this river underneath her. She's feeling a little bit hungry. And so she sits down on this bridge, and she kind of lets her feet dangle over the water. She takes out her lunch, and she sets her bag of food, all of her food stuff that she's carrying with her, next to her. And she just enjoys this incredible beauty and this incredible place to eat her lunch. Give ourselves about 40 more seconds here. Stay with that focused placement of your breath, that expansive desire through each inhale. And eventually, when it feels appropriate for you, we'll use that right hand to help press ourselves up. We'll turn back to a seat and then roll or rotate onto the right hip. And we'll do this to the second side. So right arm's going to extend out. We want that prop space to be kind of mid rib cage. Right hand can be up or down. Left hand does that same propping space. Left hand can be in front of us to offer some support. It can reach and extend towards the right, or it can reach behind us if that feels appropriate for you. And we just find our way into a supportive breath. So just as she's wrapping up this, what has truly been an incredible lunge, she hears this loud crashing in the forest just beyond her. And she rapidly swings around to get a look at what it is, and she attempts to pop up from her seat on the bridge. And as she does this, she hits her food bag, and all of the food she's carrying falls off the bridge into the river and disappears. She's only a couple days into the journey, so she has to make the decision. Does she go back? Can she live off the forest? And she kind of gathers her things, all kind of with a lookout of what might have made that loud crashing sound. She gets everything and she goes across the bridge to the side she hasn't been on yet. And the forest floor is nearly covered with raspberries. And so she makes the determination that that's a sign from the forest that's going to provide for her. So the journey continues. It continues now with an extra hardship, a hardship that she wasn't really prepared for. Finding her own food the entire way. She expected some foraging would be necessary. But 100% foraging was never the plan. Finding your way into that releasing breath. That focused directive of expansion with each inhale. We'll be here for about 30 more seconds. When it feels appropriate for you, use that left hand. We'll press ourselves up and we'll come back into a seat. One last forward fold. We're just gonna find staff and then fold. This will be really brief, just 30 seconds here. But think about giving the expansion of the posterior chain from that lateral chain room. And when it feels right, we'll walk ourselves back towards staff. Let's take our props out from behind us. We're going to set those to the side in their stacked space. So we have hot dog shape retained, and then just lower ourselves onto our spine. And as you lower onto your spine, feeling the impact you've offered. Breathing into that torso with this conscious desire to feel the space you've created. As you're breathing into this space you've created, note how the thoracic and lumbar spine are responding in comparison to one another. We've walked a very atypical class, more focused on thoracic expansion than lumbar expansion. And so how are those two kind of vital areas of the body responding in interplay with one another at this point? And then drift your awareness to the thoracic joint, right at the base of the rib cage where the lumbar and thoracic meet. And think about exhaling out and anchoring there. So as you exhale, the middle of the spine, the kind of center in a very metaphysical way, right? Anchors. And then we're going to keep that anchor and draw the thighs into that torso space. Anterior hips compress, but maybe more importantly, we're feeling how the lumbar responds to this. We're going to hold this for about 15 more seconds. Breathing, keeping that awareness on the lumbar response. And then we'll release the feet back to the ground. Think about settling completely neutral along the spinal column. And then let's re-engage our prop stack. And we're going to slide that underneath us for a supported bridge. So tailbone rises high enough that we can anchor back onto our props. And as the sacrum now shifts and becomes the primary center, the anchor, think about the lumbar expanding away from the sacrum as this gravity kind of helps make that possible, make that happen. And then keep your awareness on the expansion and expansiveness of the lumbar. The progress that this young woman makes in the forest is now dramatically slowed down. As each day significant amounts of time are dedicated to food, finding, gathering, and preparing food. And so a journey that she expected to take months has been extended out to years. When she finally reaches the base of this mountain she's had such desire to summit. And while the journey isn't over, there's this overwhelming sense of relief. She can finally see this goal she's had for as long as she can remember. She can touch this goal she's had for as long as she can remember. And so after some time, she steps foot at the base of the mountain and starts winding her way up. Give ourselves about 90 more seconds here. That awareness is on the expansion of the lumbar, really consciously feeling into that sensation of space. It feels appropriate when your body feels ready. Let's bring some neutrality, some engagement across the trunk, and we'll lift ourselves high enough to slide the props out from underneath us, slowly bringing the tailbone back down. Let's use these props one more time. We're going to take them to the lateral edges of our hips, thighs. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. Now, if they're falling out wide and they're not feeling supported, easy to just fold in half and give yourself a little more height so that you can rest here so that you can be held here by your props. At ease in the shape, at ease in your body, at ease in your breath, so that the nervous system can work on releasing tension. The release of tension can create space. The act of climbing this mountain, of summiting this peak, unveils its fair share of challenges. This woman is hit with flash, storms that seem to whisk in and whisk out without warning. The lower elevations, when a storm would come, the rain would make the ground so slippery with mud. But every single step felt like it could have dire consequences. And then she got higher and higher into elevation. When a storm would come, it often took the form of frozen water. And the snow would not only make the ground treacherously slippery, the chilling temperatures would impact her motor skills. And the snow on the ground could cover and hide dangerous gaps in the mountain's floor. But eventually the seasons changed and the snow went away completely, giving way to this beautiful mountain covered in green vegetation and reaching skyward. We'll give ourselves about 45 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate for you, bring our knees back to neutral. We can move those props out of the way. Unless you'll want them for Shavasana, we are done with those props. Take the arms out towards cactus or T and let the knees explore some rotation. One evening, she realized that she was getting very close to the summit. And so as she made her camp that night, it was with an excitement that she hadn't felt in a very long time. And the next morning, next time the knees fall over to the left, let's let them settle there. The next morning, she woke up well before sunrise, packed up all her things, and she headed up towards the summit. Each step she took was now filled with more and more anticipation. We'll bring our knees back to neutral and let the knees fall over to the second side. Until one of the steps was the last one up. She had arrived just as the sun was starting to rise. And so she looked down over this land in all directions. And was awestruck by the beauty in front of her. When it feels appropriate, knees come back to neutral. We ask ourselves if there's anything that our body might want, need, or benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, we'll offer that now. If we have everything we need, if we're ready for stillness, let's drop into our version of our Shavasana this morning and just settle there. And as this woman is looking out over this breathtaking view, she realizes something that she had maybe hoped, but didn't truly believe. All of the legends about this place were true. Everything she wanted was here. She was content. She was happy. She made it. Relaxing into your version of stillness. And as she sat fast in this feeling of contentment, this thought whispered from the back of her mind. What if there's something better? And she got up and she started looking around, and there was this little winding path along this little rocky ridge. And as she was winding down this little path, her foot slipped. And she tumbled halfway down the mountain. When she finally came to a stop, she looked up at the summit, looked around. The summit was a long way above her. Start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes, to our wrists and our ankles. Elbows and knees. Shoulders and hips. Neck, head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, the entirety of our body will move, and we'll utilize that movement to transition back into a seat. Seated space, spine gets tall. Breath is fluid, eyes close. Find that stillness within the body. And with our next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days and beyond, can you remind yourself that if you don't know how to simply be at the peak of your experience, you can never know fulfillment. See how that impacts you. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Love the heck out of you guys. Have a beautiful day. If you want to move, we'll be back tomorrow. And if not, have a beautiful week. See you soon. Mwah.